Welcome to this training video on how to import PowerPoints into Articulate Storyline. Not only will you learn how to import PowerPoints, which is a great feature and relatively easy to use, but you'll also learn all of the next steps required to turn a PowerPoint into an interactive and fully working e-learning course. First, we shall find a PowerPoint. This is the PowerPoint I want to import. I'm going to open the PowerPoint. The reason I've opened it is just to become familiar with it. It is useful to find out what you're going to be importing. And now I want to import it. Now what's important is that you close the PowerPoint. I have Articulate Storyline open, and on this screen, which is the launch screen, I go to Import. Choose Import PowerPoint. Find the appropriate folder for it, select it, click Open. Note that the PowerPoint must be from a location that you can access. It's probably best to download it to your computer first. Also, make sure the PowerPoint is closed before you try and import it. Wait for it to load a preview, which is what it's done now. At this stage, you can select certain slides to import. All of them are selected now, but I can deselect them. I would recommend you import all the slides, which is what you're more likely to do. It's also very easy to delete any unwanted slides once they're imported. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll select Import. The importing process might take quite a while, depending on the size and the content of your PowerPoint. If videos and lots of images are included, it will take longer, so just give it a chance. I've sped up the process for the purpose of this video. Also, if you think it's taking too long and it's not making any progress, just have a look on your computer and just make sure that there's not a dialog box open. There might be a box on the screen saying that it can't import certain fonts or something like that. If it can't import certain fonts, it'll just replace them with something else you have on your computer, such as Arial. I've now imported the PowerPoint into Storyline. It took about 2 minutes to import this one. It is very important now to save the Storyline project. This is a step you can easily forget. I also recommend saving frequently. This next step is very important. First of all, single click on any of the slides. Then you'll notice at the bottom right hand corner it says Slide Advances Automatically. This means that Storyline will automatically play the next slide after about 4 or 5 seconds if we were to play or preview this course. We don't want this. We want the users to be able to be in control of this. So all you need to do to change this is select all of the slides. You can do this by clicking on the first one, going to the very bottom, pressing Shift on your keyboard and then clicking on the last slide, or alternatively click on one slide and then press Ctrl A on your keyboard. That will select everything. Once you've done this, go to Slide Advances and then change it to By User. This means that the user will be the person who chooses when it goes to the next slide. Titles on slides. Notice that some of the slides, or in this case all of the slides, have titles on them. This won't always be the case. This will depend on the slide that's been brought over and created in PowerPoint. If there's not a title on that slide originally in PowerPoint, then there won't be here either. It's not a problem though if slides don't have titles. You can add them in easily if you want, and often you won't even need to use them. To add a title, click on the slide once so it's selected, right click on it, and then rename the slide. Now let's look at the PowerPoint that has been imported into Storyline. Double click on any slide. I'll pick the first one. You'll see that the layout of Storyline is very similar to PowerPoint. You can edit text, change the font and size, add in shapes and move them around, everything you'd expect to do. I'll add in a shape and a text box just to show you. On the left side of the screen are all the slides. Each of these tabs are for different slides you've had open. They will appear in a tab if you've clicked on them from the story view. At some point you'll need to close some of the tabs as you just have too many open. And to view the story view, just click on that tab. At the bottom of the screen you have the timeline. Notice all objects start at the same time. If I move an object along, then it will appear at that time of the slide. For instance, if I was to move this rectangle to here, it will appear after 4 seconds. This is most useful for bringing in arrows and animated objects, etc. It is also useful to note these two icons. The eye means something is visible. So I have a video here. If I click on the eye, it's now not visible. So if something is not appearing on the screen, it might be that you've unselected it by mistake. The lock icon will normally be blank. If you lock it, it means that the object cannot be moved or modified. This is very useful if you have an image in the background, but you're trying to select the objects on top of it. I'll move this video. I'll undo that. I'll now lock the video, and you'll see that I'm not able to actually select the video and move it. Once again, I'll unlock it. On the right side of the screen we have triggers at the top and slide layers at the bottom. Slide layers, you won't be using these with imported PowerPoints, or it's very unlikely to. You can add them in, but it's not a PowerPoint feature, so they're never going to be imported. They are, as the name suggests, extra layers for the slide. If I were to add one in, I can have extra information appearing on a layer. But that's getting more advanced than the use of Storyline. Slide triggers. This is another feature of Storyline which is quite advanced, but it is important to have an understanding of it. Triggers are commands. I'll not go into detail at this stage, but you can add a trigger and tell Storyline to do something. For instance, I can tell Storyline to jump to a slide, change the state of something, to play media, to restart or exit a course, or many other things, based upon an action. So when a user clicks on the video, it will then do something. Every slide will have triggers built in by default, and they need to be kept on the slide, unless you are doing something more advanced. These triggers are used for navigation. For instance, the user will jump to the next slide when they click on the next button. For the time being, we're going to leave triggers alone. We now know how to import a PowerPoint, how to make it so the user must move to the next screen, the layout of the screens, and a basic understanding of slide layers and triggers. We will now preview this presentation. Select the arrow below the preview button. It's actually easier to show you in story view this information. So I'm going to click on the same button. This slide means you're only going to preview the one slide that you're on. This scene, all of this is a scene. I'm going to show you a different Storyline project, just so you can see that you can have multiple scenes all within the same e-learning package. This is a different e-learning package I've created, and you can see that it has lots of different scenes. So if I was just to select this one here and say preview this scene, it would play all of this scene down here. With an imported PowerPoint though, because of the way that PowerPoints are laid out and don't have branching, you're only going to have a layout that looks like this. Selected slides, I can hold down the Shift key and select a group of them, or Control key to select individual ones. So I could say let's only play these particular slides here, or I could say play all of those ones using the Shift key. Alternatively, entire project. In this situation, entire project will work exactly the same as using this scene. That's because there's only one scene in this project. As per my example earlier on, where I had multiple scenes, that's when entire project will really become useful. I will now preview the entire project. Depending on the size of the course, in terms of the number of slides, but also images and videos, the load time for previewing will be impacted. Previewing the course. What should you look for when previewing the course? In the middle of the screen, this is the bit that we're interested in. So this is the course itself. At the bottom, we have arrows to navigate. We have a sound function and a cog for accessibility controls. At the top is the title and resources if we have any attached. This could be a PDF file, etc. It's not something I generally use in my courses, but you can. And we have the menu down the side here. So these are all of the different screens that we have. This button here collapses the menu. I'm going to show you later on how to remove the menu entirely and how to change all of the buttons on the screen. Using this, you can just jump straight to the slide that you want to. The tick boxes show that it's been completed. Alternatively, you can complete this the way that most users will, using the arrows. Along the top, we have close preview. That's the one you're going to use the most. Select means you just go to a certain slide. Replay means it's going to start the current slide. But if you click on the box here, you've got the options as to which thing you want to restart. And then you've got edit slide. If I click on edit slide, it'll take me back into the creator side of Storyline, so I can make the edits to the slide. Though something to note is that it doesn't always do it. Sometimes it just takes me back to the very beginning. So it does work sometimes, not all the time. And along the side here, we have all of the different ways of looking at this presentation. So we're going to be looking at this on the desktop view. Then you could change it to a tablet view or a mobile phone view. And this is what it's going to look like. I tend to leave this in desktop mode almost all the time. What are you looking for though when you're previewing it? So what I like to do is once I've imported the course, I like to preview the course just to see any obvious errors. Things to look out for though are that animations are not appearing in sequence, the images haven't loaded correctly, the pages just don't look right, or the layouts need editing with text not lining up, etc. So this slide here, for instance, it has a big box in it and a title that says Title 1, which is what I did earlier on. I'll close the preview and then I'll just delete those. I'll then preview it again. I might just preview this slide. And there we go. The slide's looking okay. If I try to go forward a screen because I'm only previewing a slide, I'll get an error message telling me that the slide target or the link is not available. Press OK on that, and that's because I've chosen to preview just one slide. If I want to preview everything, then I'll be doing this scene, or I could do entire project. We can see on the preview the menu down the left hand side. Well, I want to make changes to this. I'll close the preview. And then we go to player. Player options come up, and this is the preview screen that we were just seeing. So this is known as the player. I want to make changes to the player. You can include or remove all of these elements. I'll remove the elements that I don't want. I don't want the title on there. I'm going to leave volume controls on there. I'll remove accessibility controls and I'll remove captions. You can also change the style and look of the player as well. Go from a modern player to a classic player. And also colours and effects. I'll leave it how the original settings were. Something you might want to add in is the seek bar. The seek bar shows the progress of a slide. If there are animations etc. coming in, then the user could go backwards and see the animation again. But be aware it will appear on all slides and it will be the length of the timeline. Personally, I always remove it, though if you're going to be having audio on here, which is not in the video, so just audio by itself, you might want to leave it on there so a user can move it forward and backwards. I've made all the changes that I wanted to it. I'm going to press OK. Just a nice little reminder for you, do remember to keep saving the project as you make the changes. Something very worthwhile looking at is slide setup. So slide setup is the size of the slide. I recommend that you see what it was on PowerPoint and you see what it is in Storyline. If you're finding images and text all squashed together, it might be because of the slide setup in Storyline. In Storyline, go to Design, Slide Size, and then make changes as necessary. In PowerPoint, depending on the version that you're using, it's found in Design and then Slide Size. And these are the dimensions listed here. If we go to Custom Slide Size, it gives you more information. If you do this in Storyline, it will change on every slide. You can't just do it on one slide. So again, when you're previewing this and going through the course, check to see how it looks. Let's look at the timeline in a bit more detail. Each line here has a different object on it. If you single click on it, you see the object is also selected on the slide. It works the other way around as well. If I select an object, it shows on the timeline. Moving the object up or down doesn't have much impact. It can do if you start creating triggers, but for normal use it doesn't really do anything. But moving an object left or right will impact on it, because that's going to be the time in which it appears on the screen. So this one here will appear at 6 seconds, this one here is at 11 seconds, I can change it to be 9 seconds. And all you do is drag them left and right. If you have grouped objects together in PowerPoint, they will import into Storyline as a group as well. A group of objects all move together. So this here is a group of objects. And if I move them, they all move together. So the rectangle, the triangle and the circle don't move independently. I know they're a group because I've clicked them here and it shows that they're group 7. If I click on this small arrow, I can see what is within the group. And what I can do, if I select the individual part of the group, I can make changes to that individual object. Click away from there again, click on it again, I'm back to the group. I can also collapse the group. To separate the group, right click on it, select group and then select ungroup. Click away and now we have individual objects. To regroup them, highlight all of them, right click, group, group, and there we have the group again. If an object has not come through properly from the import of the PowerPoint, then you may need to ungroup it if it's within a group and then make changes to it. But you know how to do that now. If your PowerPoint slide had animations, then Storyline will bring these animations over as well. 3 key points to be aware of. All animations will play automatically and in sequence. In PowerPoint, if you had an arrow appear as an animation, for instance, then the user had to click to make the next arrow appear. Well, this won't happen in Storyline. You'll need to use triggers to make this work. What will happen is that all the arrows will come in. I'll show you this as a demonstration. So on this slide, I've made it in PowerPoint so that some arrows come in. So a user would have clicked for them to come in, but on this one here, I'm not doing anything and the arrows are just appearing. And there were intervals, I think it was at 5 seconds they were set. The next point is the animations will appear at predefined time period, as shown in the timeline. Normally this is a gap of 5 seconds. I recommend that you change this because it is quite a long gap, unless you've got something else planned and that's what you wanted. To make the change though, you just move them along. Another point is that you should always check that the animations are working as expected, that they're coming in from the correct direction, etc. What I recommend you do is open up the PowerPoint, see how it plays on that screen, and then make sure it's playing the same on this screen as well. To see the animation attributes, go to the Animations tab. So up here we have Animations. I have an animation selected and we can see that it's going to fly in. It's going to last for half a second, and the effect option is it's going to fly in from the right. We know which objects are animated because they have a small star next to them. If you want to remove an animation, click on the object, go into Animations, where we have fly in, just select None. You can do this for multiple objects at the same time. There you go, the animations have all been removed. You might want to have animations appear at the click of a button. There are two scenarios to talk about here, and both are more complex than what we've covered so far in this training. Scenario 1, you want to click a button and have all the animations appear, either all at the same time or straight after each other, but all will appear at the click of one mouse button. Scenario 2, you want to click a button to have one animation appear, and then the user must click the button again to make the next animation appear. Scenario 1 is the easier of the two to create. This is wanting all animations to appear at the click of a button. That's what we'll do first. On the screen we have animations that I'm going to be using. So each of these objects are animated, and on the timeline they appear after a certain length. I'm just going to modify this so they all appear still after each other, but a much shorter delay. And there you go. Not perfect, but it'll do for the purpose of this. So I'm going to preview this just to show you what it looks like. So I'm previewing this slide. And currently you can see all the animations are appearing after each other. I've not clicked anything, this is just how it is. And this is what's being imported in from PowerPoint. The only thing I've changed is the timings for each object to come in. Now that we've seen the preview, we know how it works. What I want to happen is for this slide to load, but for the timeline to stop before the animations start. For this to happen, you need to tell Storyline that you want to pause the timeline. You need to link this to an object. And just to make you aware, for some reason, that object cannot be a text box. It needs to be an object such as a picture, a shape, or a button. This will all start to make sense as we build up the scenario. So I'm going to create a button. If we go to Insert, Button, you've got choices here as to what it looks like. I'll go for this one here, and I'll insert it there. If I click on it, I can then type in there. I've typed click here. Now it's important to make this look nice, so I'm going to fill the button, give it a border, I'll make the text a bit more readable. What else I'll do, I'll go to Format, Button Effects, I'll give it a shadow. There you go, it looks a little bit nicer. You can do this as a shape as well. So I'm going to show you this just so you're aware. So I could create practically the same thing. So I can create almost the same thing. I could have it exactly the same colours. I'll leave it as it is just so you know which one's which. I'm going to preview this slide. don't worry about the animations. What I want to show you is these differences. So we've got click here, and this is the box. So if I move my mouse over it, nothing happens. But on this click here, which is the button, you can see that it changes colour slightly, and also my mouse cursor changes. So that's the real difference between a button and just a box. You could modify the shape so that it has different features to it, so it does change as you hover over it. However, creating a button just makes it easier and quicker. So I'll close the preview, I'll delete the shape, and now we're going to work on this button. Let's create the triggers to make this scenario work. So this button, there's two things that are important. One is that it must start before the objects that you want to animate. So these objects that I want to animate are all starting at about 2 seconds onwards. This button currently starts at 0, so that's good, it's before the object. However, you can't have it at 0, you've got to have it any time after 0. So it's now going to be about 1/4 of a second. So what's going to happen is that this screen is going to load up, the button will load up about 1/4 of a second later, and then currently these objects are all going to load up after 2 seconds, 2 and a bit, and so forth. So that's the first thing to do. Secondly, select the object and click on this trigger button. And we want this scenario to be created. So when you start off, you will have different options here. It might say change state of, or it might say jump to slide. What we wanted to say is pause timeline. So the action is to pause the timeline on this slide, which is correct. And the default is for it to say when user clicks on button 1. So this is button 1. We don't want it to be when a user clicks on button 1. We want it to be when the timeline starts on button 1. What's going to happen then, the screen's going to load, and after 1/4 of a second, which is when this button loads, that's when the rest of the timeline is going to stop, it's going to pause. And because it's pausing, it means that none of these elements here, so none of these pictures, can then load up. So I'll press OK. I'll demo this just to show you. So I go to preview this slide. So you saw that the page loaded, about 1/4 of a second later this button appeared. So this button is clickable. I'm clicking on it, nothing's happening because we haven't programmed that yet. But you notice none of the animations have come through. So I'm going to close that preview, and then we'll go to the next step. The next step is to create another trigger for the same button, and that trigger is going to start the timeline. So we want the trigger to be that when a user clicks on the button, the timeline starts. And because the timeline's then started, it'll progress, and then all of these objects will start to load as it hits that part of the timeline. So let's show you. So I'm going to click on the button. The only reason we've got 2 triggers is just because I've been practicing doing this for the creation of this video, and I've accidentally created one already. So there should be just 1 trigger for this button. So I'll click on the button so it's selected. I'm going to create a new trigger. It says pause timeline on. We don't want that. We want it to resume the timeline. Resume the timeline on this slide when the user clicks on button 1. Press OK, and let's preview it. So the slide loaded, the button loaded about 1/4 of a second later. The animations have not come through. I'm going to now click on the button. And there we go, the animations are now all coming through. So that's how you create that scenario of making the user have to click on a button to start the animations. We're now going to look at scenario 2. And scenario 2 is that a user must click a button for the animations to appear but they must click the button each time they want the animation to appear. So the animation will appear on this object, then they must click again for this object, and they must click again for this object, and so on. Something to note here is that Storyline in this scenario doesn't particularly like animations when they're applied to these objects. So if this object had an animation, such as it flying in, which is what I'm going to show, then often it likes to just repeat it, so it will show the animation twice, which doesn't look very good. But let's experiment and see if it does it this time as well. So we're going to do exactly the same scenario as scenario 1, where we have a button and it pauses the timeline, and then when we click on it, it resumes the timeline. Now that's not going to change. Okay, so it pauses the timeline when it first appears, which is after 1/4 of a second, and then it resumes every time a user clicks it. What we want to do now though, we want to go to each of these animated objects and we want to set a trigger on each of those. The trigger we're going to set is telling Articulate that when it loads, we want it to then pause the timeline. So what will happen, the timeline will load, you'll click this button, this object will load, it will then pause the timeline, which means that this object will not load. You must then click the button and then that object will load, and then we pause the timeline so this object doesn't load, and so on. Let's show you how to do this. So click on the first object that's going to be loading in, click on the button for the trigger, and we wanted to pause timeline on this slide, not when the user clicks the picture, but when the timeline starts on the picture. And the reason why timeline starts is because this is when the timeline starts, which is after about 2 seconds. If we chose timeline ends, well, it's currently ending, I don't know when, maybe certainly after 26 seconds. We want it to be when the timeline starts. So I'll click OK. So let's preview this just to see how it works. So I'll preview this slide. So the screen's loaded up, the button's there, the animations have not come through, which is correct. I'll click here. The object is loaded, but the next one is not loaded. I'll now click here and we see that the objects have all loaded. But notice that first one came back in. I'm going to replay this slide just to show you. So I'll click here and it loads, so that's perfect. But when I press click here again, you'll notice it loads again, and we don't want that. That's because of the fault in Articulate, where it wants to show the animation twice. So I'm going to have to close this preview, but we can see in principle that it's working. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to highlight all of these objects. I'll go to animations, I've got fly in, and I'll just change that to none. So what's going to happen is that when I click on the button, the object's going to appear, it's just not going to be able to fly in from the top, from the bottom, or anything like that. Now, there might be a workaround on this, but I can't find the workaround. I've tried numerous different scenarios and I've been trying for many years, but I just cannot get a workaround for this. I've clicked on the object and we can see it says pause timeline on this slide when the timeline starts on the picture. I'm going to then repeat that for all of these other ones. If you need to keep repeating the same trigger, you've got two options. One, select the object, click the button for triggers. It then says pause timeline on this slide when the timeline starts on this picture, which is correct. You can just press OK. That's easy. Storyline's remembered the last trigger that you created and it's allowing you to very quickly recreate it. What you can do though, you can copy that. So I've selected the actual trigger by clicking on it. I've then done Control-C on my keyboard. I'll click on the next object, Control-V, and it's then pasted it here. I'll repeat the process for each of these. And you can see on the right hand side, more triggers are being created. And there we go. You can see we've got a nice big list of triggers now. If I click on any of these with a single click, you can see it highlights the object in the middle of the screen. Now let's see if this works. I'm going to preview this slide. Page is loaded, buttons loaded, the animations have not loaded. I'll click the button. First animation loads. I'll click the button again. Second one loads. Notice that the first one didn't repeat itself, so we've solved that problem. I'll keep clicking. I'll click again. And there we go. That's how you create that scenario. So we've got it that every time you want something to load up on the screen, the user must click a button. Now I'd recommend that you tidy this up. You might want to give the user some instructions and say, to start the animations, click the button below. I've just said click here. You can do whatever you want. One other little disclaimer to put in there. If I was to insert an icon, so I'll click on this little icon option here, you might want to add in something like a play button. Something like this, which looks good. So I'll insert that. And instead of having the button, maybe you want to have this play icon as your button. Now, something to be very aware of, the user must click on this if you're to use it, but you see the part in the middle? Well, that's not clickable. Only the black bit is clickable. So again, users will get confused because they'll try and click in the middle and nothing's happening. It's only when they go to the actual black parts of it that things change. So if you're going to do that, well, I recommend that you don't, in all honesty. I would personally stick to having a button, and as we've seen with the button, when a user hovers over it, it changes its colour, and also you can add a shadow and things to make it look quite nice. But you now know how to have two different scenarios where if you click a button, everything appears, or if you click a button, one object appears and the user must keep repeating. If your PowerPoint has videos embedded, these will also be imported. You need to make some changes to the videos because the default is for the videos to play automatically, and also there'll be no video controls included. But you can add them in. Let me show you what an imported video looks like. Both of these are videos. We can see their videos in the timeline by the little icon. And let's play these. So I'm going to preview this slide, wait for the slide to generate, and both videos are playing at the same time and instantly. That also means that the audio for both of those will be playing at the same time and instantly as well. In this particular scenario, it's not the end of the world because of the videos. However, imagine if you had a video of two different people speaking at the same time. The user wouldn't be able to understand it. But making changes to the videos so that you add in a player for them is relatively simple. So first off, find the video, select the one that you want. So I'll click on that with a single click. And then along the top you'll see something that says options. So this only appears once you've clicked on the video. Select options, and you've got some options to change here. So show video in slide, we leave that as it is. Play video automatically. We can say when clicked or when triggered. We'll go with when clicked. And then we have show video controls. Currently there's none, but select it as below video. Let's preview this again. Now, the problem with this is that the video control is just below this video, so we're going to need to edit it to move the position of it. There we go, we can see the video controller there. This is something you need to bear in mind when editing. You need to make sure there's enough space for the player. We're going to repeat the task for this video as well. So I'll say below video and I'll play when clicked. So same thing again, so line them up so that they're on the screen. I'm going to preview now. Now this time it should be perfect. two videos and neither of them are playing, press play. Oh, we can see that one there working. Also, the user can go back by just clicking the timeline or go forward. They can pause the video, and then this video here as well, and this video is playing. Once again, same features. If you have any audio or sound files in your PowerPoint, these will be imported over. They'll be in your timeline, as seen here, but also there'll be an icon on the screen as well. This icon will not appear when you preview or publish the course. Couple of things to note: the audio will always be at the very beginning, so if you do want it to play at a certain time, then you need to move it. Also, the audio will start and stop automatically. The only way to control audio is using the seek bar. So if you're using audio and you want the users to be able to stop the audio, rewind it for instance, then you'll need to leave the seek bar turned on in the player. Let me show you. So go to player, and then down the bottom here we have seek bar, which I've turned off. I'll just turn it back on so the user will be able to move along. Also, there's a volume control, which would be very useful for anything with audio. So I'll leave those both turned on. I'll now preview this.
When have you seen fatigue? Write a few words about a time when you have
seen
someone with fatigue.
I can rewind it by clicking on the time bar.
Write a few words. When have you seen fatigue? Write a few words.
I can change the volume setting as well.
Seen someone with.
I'm now going to show you how to add an exit button. So when the user finishes the course, they can just close the course by clicking on the X at the top right of the window. But you might want to build in an exit button. So to do this, once again I'll insert a button, choose what you want it to look like. So I'll choose this one here, add some text in it, change it however you want. I'll add a shadow to it just to make it look a bit nicer. There's my exit button. I again need to use triggers. So with this button here, I'll select the trigger icon here. I'll create a new trigger. And the action is I want to exit the course when the user clicks on button 1. Press OK. And you can see my trigger sat here now. Let's preview this. If I hover over the button, I can see it changes. I can see my icon changes as well. Click exit, and there you go. It closed down the preview. Just to make you aware, if you use the, just to make you aware, if you publish this and use the Review 360 function, the exit button doesn't work in this function. But this is only used for reviewing the course anyway. It does work if you publish it to the LMS. If your PowerPoint has any notes in it, so these are notes down here, I call them training notes. There goes none on this slide, but there are here. Then these will be imported over. So in Articulate Storyline, you've got the timeline function here, you've got states, and you've got notes. So click on this, we've got the same note, welcome to this training course. This second page didn't have any notes and there aren't any here. You can add them in as well if you want. Personally, I don't use notes in e-learning courses, however the functionality is available. If you want to see these notes when you're actually playing the course, you can. Go to Player, and select Notes. Press OK, and let's preview the course. So I'll go to the screen here. So the course is playing normally and we have the notes here. It says welcome to this training course. You can collapse this panel by selecting this icon. Once again though, it's not a function I've ever really seen used in e-learning courses when they've been delivered. However, you can if you want to. Another key point is that you can actually publish the notes. So if I go to publishing, one ability is to publish as a Word document, and you have the option to show slide notes. So you can publish the entire course with the notes published as well as a Word document. You have the ability to publish courses as Word documents. This might be useful if you wanted to print off the e-learning and read it. It's not a feature I've ever used, but I'll show you how to do it. Go to Publish, and then from here select Word. Choose if you want to show the slide layers, though if you import in a PowerPoint you're not likely to have layers. Show slide notes. Tick this if you want to show any notes. So these are those notes or trainer notes from PowerPoint. Choose the screenshot size. I'll leave it as medium. Select Publish. I'll then view the document to show what it looks like. We have the course title, and we have all of the sections here. So this is the main section, where there's only one section here. These are the headings. Screenshot. This page has some notes in it. Same with the second page. And there's no further notes on any of the other pages, but you can see all of the screenshots. You might have imported a PowerPoint which is being used in the master slides in PowerPoint. And there might be something like a company logo on that master slide which needs editing. Much like in PowerPoint, Storyline uses master slides. Go to View, Slide Master. You see the view will change, and then find the slides that you're using and make the changes to them. I won't go into any more detail because it operates in the same way as it does in PowerPoint. So I'd recommend that if you wanted to learn about master slides, learn about them in PowerPoint first. It'll probably be more useful, and you might want to make the change in PowerPoint in the first place before you import it. The final thing to do is publish the course. To do this, select Publish. Give the course a title. Check the title of the course and make sure you're happy with it. If not, make a change. And then you've got options along the side here. Review 360. This creates a course that goes online and other people can review it. You'll be sent a link to do this once you've published the course. The other option you're going to use is this one here for LMS. So check the title, make sure you're happy with where it's going to save, and you've got options here. Now these are all clickable. A lot of people don't realise that you can click on them here. So you've got Player. Now we've been in the player already, and we've made all the changes to it, but it's always worth checking it, that you make sure you're happy with it. Quality. This is very important, so select this here and it can say different things. The first time you use it, it will probably be in standard. Now what you want to do is make sure you change the video quality and the image quality to the maximum. So scroll all the way over to 9 and 100%. The reason they're set to a lower standard is because when Articulate Storyline was first launched, the internet is a lot slower to get things on the internet, so you wouldn't always want the highest quality. But now it's a lot easier to get things onto the internet, and you want to definitely go for the highest quality. Select OK. You've then got Report to an LMS. Have this ticked, and you've got to choose from the options down here. Now, SCORM 1.2 is what I've always used with all of my clients. So even going back to as far as 2012, I was using SCORM 1.2. Some people might use Tin Can, but anyway, go with SCORM 1.2 is what almost everywhere uses. If you're not sure what SCORM is, well, SCORM's a way of tracking what people have been doing on the course. So once a user takes a course and actually starts the course, it'll say that that person started it. Once they've completed the course, it'll record to the LMS system that they've completed the course as well. If there's any tests involved, it would say that they've done a test and they achieved 100% or 90% or whatever they got. That's what SCORM does. SCORM does the tracking for it. It doesn't actually matter if you've not got any tests or anything like that in there, just leave it ticked. So select Publish. It will then create the course. Depending on the size of the course, it might take longer. So just always give it a chance to do this. That's the course published. I recommend you select a zip. This will create a zip file. This is the file that you're going to need if you're going to upload this to an LMS course. This will normally be saved in the same location, which will be your My Articulate folder. If you select a View Project, it will launch the course in your internet browser. But from this stage you can simply press Close and then exit Articulate Storyline. The very final step in this process is to get the zipped file and then send it to your Learning Management System administrator for them to upload so other people can then access the course. It will be saved in whatever location you chose to save it just a moment ago. I also highly recommend that you upload the storyline file somewhere as well to keep it safe. When you're working from it, it'll be on your computer, but make sure you upload this so that someone else or yourself can edit this in the future if you need to make any changes. And if you make any changes, you will need to publish and zip the file again. Thank you for watching this training video. I hope you found it useful.